Hi, hello, and welcome to the Birth Confidence Summit. I'm Charlotte Kanye from Birth Essence, and today we are welcoming Alexia Leachman from Fear Free Childbirth, who does a lot of super work clearing out everybody's fears from childbirth with a podcast and lots of fear clearance work. So I'm really delighted to welcome Alexia onto the summit today. Hi, Alexia.
Hello, Charlotte. Thank you so much for having me. I can't wait to have this conversation.
I know, it's going to be so exciting. So I'd love to start with a little bit more detail and background about how you got into this work, because I know you've got a different background in marketing and all kinds of things, and then you now specialise in this super work here. So
yeah. So my background's marketing. I worked 15 years in the health and beauty industry, and I quit that because I wanted to do something a little bit more fulfilling, and I became a coach. And I was various guises of coaching, and then I sort of was a mindset coach when I found out that I was pregnant. And so I'd learned a lot of mindset techniques, but when I found out I was pregnant, I hit an emotional wall, a dark place, and I didn't know what was going on. I didn't want to be pregnant; it was not planned, and it was very difficult for the first 2 weeks, and then we lost the baby at 7 weeks. And what really took me by surprise was the relief that I felt at losing the baby. And at that moment, I thought, "Oh, what's going on here? This doesn't feel like a normal emotional response." And I thought I was in a bit of a mess. I thought I was a bit of a lost cause in that sense. And I really decided to kind of explore what was going on, like trying to understand why would I feel relief at having a miscarriage. And I'd not long lost my mum very suddenly to cancer, so I was wrestling kind of some brutal grief. I was pretty anxious and stressed, probably some depression thrown in there. So I was in a bit of an emotional mess. And so I spent the next year really sorting out, exploring a lot of that anxiety, that own stress and depression. And when I was pregnant a year later, I felt a lot stronger, but I was absolutely terrified of birth. And at that point, I was like, it's going to be a C-section. Just I want all the drugs in the world because I literally can't cope with this idea of a baby coming out of me. And so that was my position at that point. And I started reading about birth. I learned that if you are experiencing a lot of fear, which I had, that it made birth really painful. And I thought, well, okay, so pain's one of my fears. If I get rid of my fears, then it won't be painful, and then it could be doable. And so I'd trained a lot of mindset techniques. I'd done some therapeutic stuff. So I decided to kind of pull together some ways of me being able to clear my own fears. And so that's what I did. And so I spent 2 months clearing all of my fears, and I had a load of them. And so by month 7, I did such a good job that I thought, I don't want a C-section. I'm going to go for a home birth. And so that's what I did. I ended up having an amazing home birth that didn't hurt. And yeah, I was like, wow, that was the most amazing experience. And it's only after I had given birth that I discovered there's a thing called tokophobia, which is the extreme fear of birth and pregnancy. And I realized when I read about it that was probably what I had, and that was probably why I experienced relief at having a miscarriage. And so that was the beginning of me kind of I didn't get into that work at that point. I just thought I was this kind of weirdo like that. I thought that everybody was excited about pregnancy, that everybody wanted to have babies, and that everybody was really into pregnancy and birth. So the idea that I wasn't, I thought I was a bit of a lone wolf in that respect. And so I didn't really think, I thought just it was me being a weirdo, me being just, this crazy loopy person that I was when I was early in my pregnancy and when I'd lost the baby. And it was only a few years later when I had a second baby and I was able to clear new fears that had come up. I started getting lots of emails from women that I didn't even know saying, how did you do that again? How did you go from being terrified to having another great birth? And I was like, how do these people know? Like, I don't even know these women. Like, what's going on? Who's passing my email around? Like, and so I was kind of, I started to realize that actually a lot of women have got fear. And so these emails were quite lengthy to write, because as you can imagine, I'm sure you can appreciate, Charlotte, that when you start unpacking your fears and clearing them, that's not a quick email reply. When they go, how did you do that? It's not a couple of sentences. So after a while, I was like, oh my God, if I get another one of these emails, I'm going to write a book. And I got another email and I was like, okay, I'm going to write the book. So that's what I did. I started writing my book, Fearless Birthing, when my little one was like 2 months old. And I wrote it, the first draft, within 3 months. And I was like, oh, what do I do with this? I've got a book and I'm a business coach, a business mindset coach, mainly working with men. And I've just written a book on pregnancy and birth. And so that's what, I was like, it doesn't work, does it? It doesn't work. So I was like, I'll share some of this quietly on a podcast, because I had a podcast at the time that was doing very well, the Head Trash Show. I was like, I know, I'll just share some of this on a podcast. Little maternity project. So I launched the Fear Free Childbirth Podcast. And I started sharing bits of the book, ideas in the book. And then it just started going crazy. And I started getting even more emails. And I was like, oh. So that was when I decided to focus my energy within this area, because I decided at that point that stressful men in business, there's a lot of people that help them. There's probably not that many people helping fearful women around birth. So I decided to focus my energy and efforts in that area. And so that's when that's when my work started, really. And that daughter has just turned 5. So it's 5 years now that I've been doing this work, and it's incredibly rewarding. And it's all kind of mushroomed a bit more since the book's come out, Fearless Birthing. Also, I've got online programs. I work with women with tokophobia, group sessions, online sessions with women all around the world. I've got digital products. So yeah, lots of things to help, depending on what kind of fear you have, how fearful you are, how much support you need, what your budget is. No matter where you are on there, I've got probably something that can help you get to a really good place, an empowered place around birth and pregnancy. I realise I've whittled on a bit there, Charlotte. Does that answer your question?
No, that really does. It's beautiful. I mean, I've been on your podcast. I know how wonderful all the stories are on there. And it made me think, as I'm listening to you and how you didn't realise that so many people were scared, it's like, I think we're conditioned not to speak up and to keep silent. So I think there's an enormous number of women scared that are not speaking up to anyone and kind of minimizing their fears inside and putting this brave face on and not telling anyone, really, and being scared to tell someone they're scared, like don't want to admit it. And stories about how we should be able to do this, or oh, we're delighted with the baby, it should be an enjoyable time, and then it's acceptable to go, oh yeah, the birth, oh. And so people are putting up with it. And so I think it's wonderful that you've got these different stories on your podcast and your story to share that's changed the dialogue. So you can go, oh, actually, okay, yeah. And then, because there's a big difference of squashing your fears and then actually doing something about them.
Yeah. And I think you're right. There is a lot of the narrative around birth is incredibly negative in the media. You see a lot of horror stories about things going wrong and it being the most painful thing. I mean, childbirth being the gold standard in pain, nothing's more painful than birth. And so women are coming into this experience with a lot of kind of negative conditioning around birth. And there isn't really anybody that can maybe, that acknowledges that. Because often when they speak among themselves, it's like, oh no, it's lovely. Pregnancy is my best time. I just felt so wonderful and I was glowing and da, da, da. And there isn't really room for maybe some other kind of dialogue going on. All people get dismissed. Oh, don't worry, it'll be fine. Loads of women have given birth. How do you think we got here? And a lot of these fears just get dismissed. It's the most natural thing in the world, blah, 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 blah. And so those women with extreme fears really do go through this sense that people don't understand. People aren't really, they don't understand them. And that therefore they feel even more isolated with their fears around that. And so that can be very difficult for people to handle. And they feel like they've got nowhere to go. And they might even go to their midwives or doctors and share their fears, and even they might shrug them off. So if you can't go to a medical care provider and share some of that, then where can you go? It can be very, very isolating.
Yeah, especially like you said, if you don't have someone who trusts birth, who knows that it can be different, who can give you a different perspective that's really grounded in reality. As if you're sharing horror stories with each other, you're just going to get yourselves all more scared.
Completely.
I hear so many people go on, they say they're pregnant to people, and then everyone on the streets going, oh yes, I heard such a person and she had this terrible time, and you're like, thanks.
Yeah. No, I know, and I just, there's all this parallel that's drawn between birth and a marathon, and how it is this big event like a marathon, and it really is. It is this kind of lengthy endurance of the body and mind, and that's very much like a marathon. But when people are saying I'm going to do a marathon, you don't hear loads of people going up to them, oh my god, did you hear that guy, he died? You don't want to do that. That woman, she just had a heart attack right at mile 7. I mean, you've got to sort yourself, like, don't do this, what are you doing? You don't get that kind of dialogue when people are saying marathon. You get sponsored, you get money, people give you stuff, they come and cheer you on. Why doesn't that happen around birth? Like, what is it about people? Why do they want to come out and start saying how bad it is? It's infuriating is what it is. It's absolutely infuriating.
Yeah, and you've had a lot of stories of women who've really changed, haven't you? And really changed their perspective, their dialogue, and it can really make a difference to your whole motherhood journey.
Well, it does. I think if you start motherhood having had a great birth that you enjoyed, that was what you wanted it to be, even if it wasn't the way you planned it to be. I'm not saying that, because obviously birth doesn't always go to plan, but you can still have a journey that goes slightly off plan that still ends up fulfilling you emotionally, and it was amazing, and you discover things about yourself. You know, you come out of birth with one of those experiences, and that really does set you up in a good place emotionally for motherhood. It gives you that emotional strength. You feel empowered every time you see your baby. You're like, oh my God, that was amazing. Every time, if you had a home birth, every time you see the spot where you had your baby, it kind of fills you up again. You know, these things can really help you in motherhood. Whereas, you know, if you've had a difficult birth experience that you feel traumatized by, then maybe your partner was traumatized by, because you know, the whole family's involved in that situation, and now the baby's not sleeping well, the baby's not bonding, and there's not breastfeeding, and it really does set everything up very, you know, on the back foot going into motherhood, which can just make that experience so much more difficult. So for me, I think it's absolutely worth doing everything that you can to make your birth as fabulous as possible. And that doesn't mean it's always going to be easy. I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but it's just setting yourself up emotionally so that you can handle whatever's going to come your way and come out thinking, yeah, that was damn hard, but I did it. And as a result of that, I feel amazing and I can do anything. This motherhood thing, yeah, bring it on. And that just sets such a different tone to somebody that's kind of really struggling coming out of birth. And so I think there's a lot you can do to set yourself up for a great birth experience. And I'm not saying that will guarantee a great birth experience, absolutely not, but you can do a hell of a lot to stack the cards in your favour. And I think that's what I really want to help women to do, because it can be the defining moment for you as a woman. You are becoming a mother. I mean, that, you know, for those that are first-time mothers, it is a defining moment. It's the time that you become a mother, and that comes with whole hosts of changes in identity and how you feel about who you are. And some women really do transform as part of that process, and some people resist it. You know, they resist that change. And I know I resisted that change with my first, and I was still driving around the hot hatch. I was still like, no, I don't want to get all the, you know, still clinging on to my pre-mother life in many ways. And I think I only really fully accepted my role as a mother with the baby number 2, and I finally got the mum car and really kind of accepted it a little bit more fully. But I think if I'd not had a great birth, I think it would have been much harder for me to do that, to accept being a mother in that way. I don't know. I'm waffling now, I think.
Don't know what you don't know, I guess. So tell me a little bit more about tokophobia, because people haven't heard of the word, so they don't always know. I've heard of people like with the same with trauma, they don't know till someone tells them afterwards what they had or what was happening. So tell me.
Yeah. So tokophobia is the pathological fear of birth and or pregnancy, or the extreme fear. So and it can happen. There's 2 ways of describing it. There's primary tokophobia and there's secondary tokophobia. So primary tokophobia is women that haven't given birth or haven't had a direct birth experience, and secondary tokophobia is typically those that maybe are fearful of birth as a result of a traumatic birth experience. And I kind of like to add another layer onto that. I think that the primary tokophobia women, that they can't maybe point a finger at an event that's made them traumatic, made them fearful of birth, but maybe there is an experience that happened that they just can't remember, maybe as a child, or maybe it's their own birth experience, that has really sort of planted that fear for them. Because the way that we are born, our own birth experience just sets an emotional imprint up for all of us, and many of us are just not conscious of our own experience of birth, and so we don't know how that was for us. We might have heard stories from our mothers, and mothers might say, oh, it was horrific, and or they might go, oh no, it's great. But it doesn't matter what mum thought, it's what you felt as a baby. How did you feel coming out the birth canal, if that was your journey, or being pulled out with a C-section? How was that for you? You know, did you feel claustrophobic? Did it feel tight to you? Did you get stuck? Did you feel panicky? All of those things can play out and result in us having fears of birth. And so in the work that I do with women with tokophobia, we find a lot of the time that there is a trauma at the root of the phobia, and often that trauma is birth related, maybe their own birth or maybe from a previous birth. And so what does tokophobia look like in day-to-day life? Well, it can vary massively. So I had a version of it where I couldn't even contemplate the idea of birth. I just wanted to be knocked out cold for the whole of that experience. For me, it was very much around the birthing, the delivery, but even I couldn't really handle seeing bumps, moving bumps, women stroking bumps. The whole idea of something moving inside me was quite nauseating and really repulsive. And so the idea of, you know, when women are sitting there cradling their bumps, it was like that just, I couldn't, you know, my sister-in-law was pregnant. She was 6 months ahead of me when I first found out, and I was sitting here watching her stroking the bum, and I was like, don't do that in front of me. And I couldn't handle it. And that a lot of women with tokophobia feel that way. They can't handle the idea. They might use words like alien, inside you, a parasite feeding off its host. These are the kind of language that they'll be using around how they feel about pregnancy. And then there are some women that they're totally fine with the pregnancy. It's all about the delivery, and some women it's both. So it really does depend that, it can be pregnancy, it can be the birth, it can be both. So, but what that means is they might not be able to hold down a relationship. They might not be able to have sex with their husband because they know that sex can lead to babies. They might not, they don't like going to family events because they're going to be asked about babies. They don't like seeing baby announcements on Facebook. All the women at work talking about their pregnancy. All of these experiences, seeing a family in a supermarket, can really trigger them and help them really add to how they're, make them feel, again, more isolated because how different they feel and the fact that nobody understands. And then they might go to their doctor, they might go and seek help. And then the doctors are just like, they've never heard of tokophobia. So they just kind of go, oh no, it'll be all right. You'll be fine in the end. Lots of women do it. You'll be okay. This is normal. And it's like, well, no, not normal how I'm feeling. That doesn't feel normal because nobody understands. I'm being shrugged off wherever I go. So it's a very complex phobia to experience because, there are other phobias that we have in day-to-day life, like flying phobia, spider phobia, I don't know. But, if you don't like flying in a plane, you just don't go to an airport or get on a plane. But if you have tokophobia, you have nowhere to run. You can't go shopping because there will be pregnant women and babies everywhere. You can't go on Facebook. You can't go to work because there might be a baby announcement and people talking about birth. Like literally, it can be very, very difficult, and it can really make add to things like anxiety and depression in a way that makes it incredibly hard to kind of overcome and get past. So and then you get some women that desperately want a baby. They get pregnant and they can't handle being pregnant, so they have an abortion. And yet this is a baby that they want. And I've worked with women that have had 3 abortions of babies that they want. So it's a very tragic, difficult phobia for some that really warrants more attention on it, warrants people taking it seriously, because it really does. When you are able to help somebody overcome those fears and go on to consider having a family, it truly is life-changing. It can save their family, it can save their marriage, it can just completely transform their lives in a way that is kind of quite incredible, really. So, but yeah, it's just not well understood. And there's been some research coming out recently that suggests that maybe there could be, it's estimated that maybe 14% of women suffer from tokophobia, but that could be as much as 30%. When you think about how many women experience fear around birth, women experience fear around birth could be up to 80% of women feel fear around birth, depending on when you ask them and how they're feeling that day, with hormones and everything. And so actually fear around birth is incredibly common. And 14% of women is a lot of women that have this. So we do need to be taking it more seriously, and more women need to know about it and know that there is help, that it can be resolved, it can be sorted. It's not always an easy journey, but it can be. And so to know where to go and find the right kind of help, because often the help that's offered isn't this kind of help that's going to help them get over it. And that can be deeply frustrating for them, because they think, well, I've been to see somebody about this and I still have it. That means I must be a hopeless case and I've got this for life. And so what does that do to a woman as well? So I think being able to point them in the direction of help that can actually help them is really important as well, to help them get past this.
Yeah, I know. I think it's really, listening to it's really interesting, because I know how many of us have had poor traumatic births when I look at the history of how birth is done. So, and then you're saying that sometimes when you get tokophobia and you don't know why, that you can't remember a traumatic, but there's always something that's led you to that. So there's probably a link there. And also, like, if we're not speaking up and you don't know, and then it's so common that it's normalized as well, so you're not asking for help. And then it's like that whole thing, as soon as you change the dialogue to what you're saying, it's okay to have these fears and it's okay to ask for help, and there is help, and it's suddenly like a complete different journey.
Yeah it is. And I think also it's about acknowledging when you feel that way. It's about recognizing how you feel that way, and then also wanting to do something about it. And I know with fear that's not always easy, because our fears can be so powerful. They can kind of keep us small and keep us trapped and make us feel incapable of reaching out for the help or accessing parts of ourselves that might have the solution. And I know this because I go through this myself all the time with new fears that come my way. And sometimes you think, I don't know what to do about this, and who can help me? Maybe you don't know if they're telling the truth, if they really can help you. Would it work on me? And so that can keep you where you are. And the problem comes with women is that we do have this body clock situation going on. And if you sit on this problem and you don't think about it, you will eventually run out of time to do anything about it. And it can be resolved. Tokophobia can be resolved very quickly, but depending on what else is going on for you. So if you have got anxiety, let's say you're taking meds for anxiety, you've got something else going on, maybe OCD or some other mental health condition, then that's going to mean it's just going to take you longer to sort this out. And so that's why I would always encourage women, if they are feeling this way, to really seek help as soon as possible, to give themselves enough time to process everything on an emotional level. But, you know, just because you, like, somebody came to me last week going, I want to know, should I work on getting my tokophobia sorted now? Or should I wait until I'm trying, or wait until I'm pregnant? It's like, well, just because you've decided in your head that you're trying doesn't mean that your body has suddenly got with the program and is going to make you a baby, because you might then hit fertility problems. And so then you don't know how long that's going to take. And obviously then the emotional piece is very much related to fertility as well. We know that when you're highly stressed and anxious, the tubes that the sperm go through are much narrower, so they can't get through. And that's just a simple thing, that once you start being less inflamed, the stress reduces, you get rid of the stress, your inflammatory stuff goes down, there's room for sperm to go through, you're more likely to conceive. So all of this anxiety and stress around your fears could actually stop you from conceiving as well. So you don't want to wait to sort this stuff out, because you just don't know how long you've got to sort it out, And I don't want to kind of add pressure to a situation.
But you're living with the fear on a day-to-day basis.
Exactly.
So why stay living with fear? Because it doesn't matter, even if you don't want to get pregnant. I would think, well, if you know that you've got this fear, it doesn't feel nice to have fear about anything. So, do something. And live with it. We get used to it, don't we? When we're in that negative place for a while, we get used to it and we cope with it. And then there's the fear of change out of it, because we've coped so far. And that lovely guardian kind of part of us wants to keep everything the same, just to make sure we don't get in any worse trouble. But actually, just breaking out of that feels like the hardest thing to do. But once you do it, you're like, why didn't I do that sooner?
I tell you, and that's what a lot of people say to me when we work together. So I just don't know why I didn't work. I've been looking at your website for months, and I don't know why I didn't do this sooner. And it is, I think because when we're familiar with clearing fears, and we know how easy it is and how quickly it can happen and what it's like to be free of it. So I think we've got a perspective that maybe those that aren't used to the fact that you can get rid of this stuff, they think they've just got to live with it. They don't realize that we can change our minds actually quite quickly, can lose fears really quickly. And so they haven't got that experience to help them decide to do it. And so I can see how for them it might feel, they kind of stay there. But also when you think, especially with some birth fears, where let's say, somebody has had an abortion or did split up with somebody they adored because they felt they couldn't give him the baby that they both wanted, for example. They've made some difficult decisions in their lives. And once they clear their fear, they might feel, well, how am I going to live with myself? Like, if I realised it was so easy to do that, and so that maybe they stay where they are at because of the past decisions. And so for those people, I'd like to say, you still can't change that past decision that you would have made, but you can change the future. So give yourself another chance now, to really, and then work and process through how you're feeling. Again, all that is possible with the right kind of help. You can really do that. But it is such a complex phobia, I think, that makes it. And the other part that I find quite interesting around tokophobia is phobias are often described as irrational fears, and so irrational for me, the only reason why irrational might be a sensible word to use here is when rational means doesn't make sense. And so the bit that doesn't make sense is why they feel that way. Why have I got this? That doesn't make sense, especially if they can't remember the traumatic experience. But let's not forget the high maternal mortality rates around birth. Birth can kill you. It's entirely sensible for women to be fearful of something that can kill them. So, a lot of women with tokophobia will say, well, it's not irrational. Like, it's perfectly, it's not, why is this a problem? Like, I'm not going to want to do something that's going to be able to kill me. Like, and you hear that, you think, of course. And so it's not an irrational fear. And I would argue that, because I don't think it is. It makes total sense. But the point is, there are lots of experiences in our lives that will kill us, could kill us, going out in our car, stepping out onto the road. But we don't stay at home all day worrying about that. We still go out and live our lives. And so it's about managing, bringing the fear into balance, making sure that we're not experiencing excess levels of fear, that we're able to kind of manage it. Because if we had all of those fears, all the things that possibly kill us in life, affecting us in every moment of every day, we literally would never leave the house. So it's about bringing fear into balance, getting rid of the excess fear so that we can kind of move forward despite our fears, despite possibilities, and experience life in all its magic, because it's there to be had, despite what might happen to us in wherever we might go, So that would be my perspective on that.
Yeah, it's interesting when we get attached into the mights rather than the reality. We're not listening in to the actual reality, the actual life events, our life timeline. So we're not tuning into intuition, we're tuning into fear thoughts which have no substance, no reality. And at the same time, if you tell someone it's irrational, you're kind of dismissing their lived reality, because that reality, especially if you're going to look at the mind-body connection of how you might be partially creating, then it's like as logical as it is illogical. It just is. That's where they are. That's the reality. That's the fear, and honor that. And then we'll go, well, we can change that. How do you want to feel?
Yeah.
Big
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Yeah. So I just want anybody who thinks they might have tokophobia, I think it's always worth, preparing yourself to do the work, preparing yourself to seek help, because the first step is wanting to do something about it. And some people don't want to do anything about it, and they're happy kind of complaining about the situation and wanting artificial wombs to be invented so they don't have to go through birth. And that's one possible route to go. But actually, we just need to take responsibility of how we're feeling. If we don't like anything about our own lives, it's up to us to step up and do something about that. It's not about playing the victim and expecting other people to kind of come up with solutions. The solution's within us. And so I think the first step is acknowledging that we have the solution, even if the solution is to seek help, that and to start wanting to change. Because without that, nothing else can happen, nothing else can happen. So that's the very first little step, really.
First step, yeah. I keep thinking from what you're saying of, there's a quote on my son's wall at school. I think it's Nelson Mandela, and it says, everything feels impossible until it's done. And I think what you're saying as well with women, when they're whatever level of fear, from that place inside the fear, it just feels impossible and it's never going to end. And what you're saying is that's not true. That's a story that we can change.
Yeah.
And I know, like, sometimes, like, even doing this summit, it was like, no, that I can't do it. And then you start doing it and you go, oh, I can do it. So it's amazing, that transformation, when you see people change like that.
Yeah.
And what would your vision be for the future of birth and motherhood if all this could be changed?
That's a very big question. And so I think for me, it's around women, and I hate this word I'm about to use. It's about women being empowered, and I hate the word empowerment, but I think the only time it's appropriate is in birth and pregnancy. And I think it's banded around so much. But I think within birth and pregnancy, it's so important for you to be, and again, I don't like the word power, because it does carry some patriarchal stuff around it. And it's about that, but it's about being in control of how you feel, being in control of your own destiny, being in control of your decisions, and being the one that is the one making those decisions and being in power of those things. And so I think a lot of women have difficult births, or don't have births that fill them with confidence and courage and strength, because they're not necessarily being allowed to make the decisions that they have every right to be making. That birth experience is theirs and theirs alone. That pregnancy experience is theirs and theirs alone. And unfortunately, lots of other people, places, organisations, entities are taking control out of them, out their path. And so they're left with not a lot. And so for me, my vision would be to really put women back at the heart of that. And I know there's a lot of birth professionals, midwives, that are very, very focused on women-centred care. But I think we can do so much more around that. And unfortunately, I think the institutions that we come into contact with as pregnant women worldwide just don't really support that as much as they don't. It's very difficult to find. I've just moved countries. I've just moved to France, and they're not, I think midwives aren't allowed to support women doing home births here. And I'm like, what? Like, I know in the UK we have a very low rate of home birth, around 2 to 3%. And which is crazy because it's entirely appropriate for a healthy pregnant woman to have birth at home. So when you go to countries where it's illegal for a midwife to support a woman giving birth at home, I mean, that is the kind of nonsense that I'd like to eradicate. Like, why? This is how we used to birth.
It wasn't that long ago either.
Yeah, no, it was only in the 50s
living
that it really
memory.
started getting, exactly, medicalised, that really things started changing. So why can't we get that back to that? The women supporting women giving birth. And so, but what does that take for that to happen? It takes women to be knowledgeable. It takes women to know. And, one thing, again, I've learned from moving to France is there's not a lot of information out there for women around this. And somebody said, you need to do your podcast in French. I'm like, oh, I'm not sure I've got to. Can I do that? That seems like a lot of work, because they just simply don't know. And if they did know, they would be demanding that. And that's how I think we can bring about change, is women demanding it at root level, because that's really where I think the change is going to come. And so that's how I feel that, by doing things like the podcast, by taking part in things like this, empowering women, giving them the knowledge, helping them to make decisions that are right for them, because it's not the right decision. You can't tell somebody, oh, you need a C-section or you need to give birth at home, because that might be right for you, but it might not be right for her. A lady with extreme tokophobia, the best thing for her is probably going to be to have a C-section. And that's absolutely fine. And for some women, a C-section is a really, really great way to go. But for others, it isn't going to be a good way to go. And so it's about finding the right thing for that woman, that individual, for that family, what's going to be right for her. And so it's giving her the information that she needs to make her own decisions. And I just don't think that level of information is widely available, and that women are being supported, not just within the medical environment or the healthcare environment, but also socially within their family and friends, to be able to make those kind of decisions. When I remember when people asked me where you're going to give birth, I said, I'm going to do it at home. It's like, oh, are you not near a hospital? It's like, no, I'm 5 minutes from a hospital. I just don't want to be in a hospital. Why is that? The mystery about why wouldn't I want to give birth in a hospital? This is a 26-year-old asking. She just thought that all birth happened in a hospital. Like, where does that come from? We need to change the narrative at school. I mean, when they showed me the video when I was 12 at school of a woman screaming on her back in labour in hospital, they should be showing home births at school. They should be showing all variations of normal within the school environment, so that boys know this as well, so that everybody knows going into adulthood that birth can happen in any number of ways, so that when they end up catching an episode of One Born Every Minute or an episode of The Waking Dead with pregnancy scene, they know that is just made for drama, and they know that actually in reality there are these other possibilities. But as it happened, they don't have that grounding, so that when they're watching TV and film, they're learning, and they think that birth is how it's being portrayed in these entertainment vehicles. And as we know, that's nothing like it.
You can make a difference, because there was a thread I was following in a couple of years now, but the children get shown, I'm not sure if it's year 6, they get shown a video, and the standard video is rubbish. Now schools have to have an approved video, but there are alternatives, but the teachers may just not have thought about it, because they go, oh, we're educating, we've got to do this for the curriculum. So you can go in as a parent and say, can I see that video in advance? And if you don't like it, there are places you can go, like there's a forum that I was on there where they gave suggestions of alternatives, and you can go and get a dialogue with the teacher and explain why it's important for people to see normal birth first, and that some girls are getting traumatized by seeing C-sections in school, and I know that has been the case for some. So you can actually make a difference just by something like that, and changing the dialogue in the school, like just going in and talking to the teachers and volunteering to go in and talk to the class and to get a different dialogue. It's actually possible. The things you may not have even thought of doing that, but it's actually a possibility. Because starting as young as that and getting, for families where birth is talked about and the mother's had a positive experience, those children are growing up with a different dialogue already.
Oh, totally.
And so going to school like that, there's things we can do that it's like what I like about this conversation. You can share ideas and go, oh, I can do that. That's the idea that I can do, and just take that and run.
Totally.
Big things come from steps like that.
And I think about the conversations I've had.
Energy to change things. They have the passion. They don't have they're not beaten down by life yet. They're not like, oh, well, I've got to be realistic. They just go, no, we can do this. And
And we know that there's women that have babies early, so teenagers, when they're pregnant and they have babies, they're more likely to have a positive experience, despite having done zero preparation or probably not done any classes. And I think the reason for that is because they haven't been succumbed to all this negative narrative and conditioning from society yet. They're kind of fresh into adulthood, and they haven't got any preconceived ideas about what birth is or isn't. And so they're kind of coming from a clean emotional slate, if you will. Whereas women that hit 35, they've heard all the stories, they've seen all the films, they've watched all the soaps and the documentaries, and, you know, they've kind of been exposed to culture, to the media, and family and friends, stories going on. And so they're coming into birth with these kind of ideas and expectations that may or may not be true. But also, when you think about birth, there are so many different experiences out there that, you know, when someone, you know, there's a thread I'm part of at the moment about, oh, how painful is labour? And you get some women piping up going, I hate it when women say that labour isn't painful. They're either lying or boasting, or, you know, they've just been incredibly unusual. And it's like, you know, women coming out going, it was been the most painful thing ever. And then other women going, no, it wasn't. It was, you know, mine wasn't painful. And so there's this huge range of experience. So you can't say that birth is this one thing. It's just different for everybody. But what we can do is change how we think about it, because how we think about something changes that experience for us. So what might be, you know, you often see kids coming through, they've maybe had a difficult family upbringing, and one kid gets into trouble, gets into gangs, gets into drugs, and the other kid doesn't internalize it in the same way and goes off and studies and makes a big success of their life. They both have the same experiences. They've done something different. They've interpreted them differently. They've added different meanings to those experiences, and they've gone into a very different trajectory. And I think birth is the same. We can internalize it in a very different way. We can respond to it in very different ways and actually make it a great experience for ourselves, despite what may or may not have happened, despite what we may not have heard or what we have heard. At the end of the day, it's up to us to be the vehicle for change. And I think that's incredibly empowering for me, the idea that no matter what, we can still rise up despite the stuff that's happening around us, despite what we may have heard, despite our experiences. We can still go on. And then if you have risen up and overcome something difficult like that, oh my goodness, how great does that make you feel? How much does that power you up for the other aspects of your life? How much does that spill over into all other aspects? You know, the birth experience, if it's a great one, how much does that fill you up with such, I don't know, energy and love for the mothering experience compared to if you didn't? I know that when I gave birth and after my birth experience, I was so creative. And so, you know, I wrote a book, like 80,000 words in 3 months while breastfeeding a newborn. Now, I don't know whether I could kind of bang out that kind of quantity in such a time. It really did spill out. And that you get a lot of women that hit in very creative, productive phases coming out of birth, because it can do that for you. But it can also go the other way. And so let's see what we can do to make it this amazing experience that can really define us as women in lots of ways beyond being a mother. Because I've said, you know, we're not just a mother. You know, we can be more than the motherhood part. There are so many more aspects to who we are. And I think birth can really enable a lot of those to happen. If they do kind of make you hold you back somewhat with all the childcare that you need to do that goes with it, and the breastfeeding and all the rest of it, it can feel like it's slowing you down sometimes, but actually it's also helping you along in other ways. So it's taking everything really. Anyway, yeah. So
no, I do. I think we need to reclaim the value of mother and all the other roles, because, you know, it's common to sort of be invisible as a mother, and yet, you know, reclaim the value in that, the amazingness of that. And then all the things we do as well. And I also, from earlier on in that you said that the younger women can give birth without as many issues when they haven't had that conditioning. And I think that's a really important thing to point out to people, that because birth is just a physiological, biological, ordinary process, this extraordinary thing, but it's kind of like we grow the baby without thinking, and then we panic over the birth. And it's like, animals don't have this problem. The younger people that haven't thought about it don't have the problem. People that don't get stuck in the head quite often don't have that. People that have grown up with a different picture and stories don't have those problems. So it's, and I think, I know I had a conversation with you once about heavy and light fears. And people that haven't got a traumatic background but they're terrified can be really easy to shift, because they're just soaking up the negativity, and you get actually it's just biologically normal, clear out all those media stuff, and suddenly it's like, so that's really good paradigm shift. That's, you know, to start from that place and see what comes up in resistance to that.
And I think for some, a very simple thing for many women to do if they want to start shifting their mindset is to start just reading the good books, watching some home birth videos on YouTube, watching some of the good birth documentaries. And so they can just start filling up their mind with some of the more accurate portrayals of birth, maybe, or better understanding of the physiological process. So they can start maybe letting go of some of those dramatized film-based versions of birth and horror stories they might have heard.
We think the films are real when we watch them, don't we? When you're younger, you just think that's how it is.
Yeah.
You know, like you can see sometimes that, like, okay, so water's breaking in the supermarket every single time there's a soap opera birth. You know, you can kind of think, yeah, that's just drama. But a part of that is still going in as this is how it happens. You might think, oh yeah, okay, so it's not always going to happen so much. But you still think, oh my God, you think that bit's real. Even, you know, like the panic bit and everyone's worried. You think that bit's real, even if you think it's a bit dramatized. And actually, none of it is necessarily in the remotely bit accurate. Sometimes the actors haven't given birth themselves, and they're trying to imagine it from their own media-infused ideas.
With a man directing it, who probably hasn't had kids either. You know, when you think about how little there are female directors.
And then the baby comes out washed, and it comes out with the cord already cut, and it comes out all these funny ways, you know, like.
Yeah. It's So I think getting a better understanding of how birth is can really help to. Yeah, exactly. Can really help as a good. But the women with tokophobia, they can't do that because it's too triggering for them. So if you find that you can't even, like, I know when I had it, I couldn't even read birth books. So I didn't read any birth books because I got to the diagram of a birth canal in my book and I could feel a panic attack coming up. So I couldn't even look at a diagram of birth of the body, and that kind of talks to where my fear was. It was around the birth canal. That was where my fear was, about the delivery, that part of it. And so if you find that you can't engage with films and books, and that's probably a big clue that your fears are quite deep rooted, and therefore you should probably best start with intervention and some kind of therapeutic support rather than reading and movies, because that probably isn't going to be supportive for you. It could reinforce some of your fears, because you might start really focusing on the stuff that supports how you feel, and therefore it might build it up a bit. So yeah, my only word is for those that do feel incredibly fearful is to see how you respond to that, and if it's not a great response, then go in a different direction to try and get your fear sorted.
Yeah, definitely. It's really important. And what ways do you see women's confidence getting undermined? Because sometimes people start out fairly confident, and then what do you see happening sometimes?
I think it's I think the hormones can not help in that situation, because our hormones are just all over the place during the pregnancy experience. But it's also when I think other people start, I think there's a combination of other people saying negative things around us and not being supportive of us and our choices. So if somebody says they want to have a home birth, and suddenly everyone, the mother-in-law, like, well, that's not very safe. What are you going to do if it all goes wrong? Blah, 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 and start filling her with fear and undermining her. I'm thinking, well, no, actually, I did research this. I thought this was a good idea. I think it's a good idea. And suddenly she's filled with loads of doubts. Or maybe the husband or partner isn't supportive of that choice. And actually, it's more about his fear. He's like, well, what if it all goes wrong? I'm going to be the one that it's all going to be on me. I can't possibly be responsible for anything happening. Both my husband, my wife and baby dying. And so they're like, no, it's going to be in a hospital. So suddenly it's everybody else's fears piling in, and people trying to persuade them that they're maybe making the wrong choice. And that can be really undermining, and not getting that level of support, I think, from people around you can be really, really difficult. That can be hard to handle, because it's like you kind of feel that these people should be there to support you, and why aren't they? And you're thinking, well, hang on, I'm the one doing all the reading and research. I kind of feel like I know this. Why don't they go and do this level of reading and research to get to where I'm feeling with this? But they're not. So I think that could be a huge source of undermining for women. And then also if the healthcare providers are kind of dismissing their requests, and if they kind of say they want to have XYZ as part of their birth plan, and then the OBGYN or the doctor consultant just goes, that ain't happening. And you're like, what do you mean that ain't what? And then the women a lot of time don't realise that they can kind of put their foot down, and it's not about being allowed to do something. It's about saying, this is how it's going to go. but maybe you need to find medical team that are supportive of your choices. And so it's about being well prepared and knowing what you want early on enough in the process, so that you can be having those conversations before it's too late. Because I hear a lot of stories of women, particularly in the US, where they suddenly start getting a little bit more savvy about what they want, and it's too late then for them to change which hospital they're going to be in or to find a new OBGYN. And so I think, trying to get clear reasonably early on in your pregnancy, as early on as you can, about how you'd like it to be, what kind of philosophy you want for your birth. Do you want it to be all natural? Are you happy to go to have an epidural and have some medication to support you during the birth experience, or do you really want to avoid that at all costs? And what's the C-section rate in the hospital that you're going at? Are they kind of really trigger happy to go down the C-section route, or are they really going to try and support you as much as you can, avoiding that as much as possible? So these kind of questions are really important to ask early on. And if you find that your medical team aren't supporting you with these and kind of dismiss you, that can really undermine a woman's confidence as well. And then she feels like she's got nowhere to go in terms of maybe finding somewhere else to give birth. Then you get, women that think, oh, nobody's supporting me in that environment, I'm just going to go unassisted. And so then they reject the system entirely, and they just want to go and do it themselves and have no support. And so, and is that the best for everybody? I'm not judging that. I'm saying, I'm just saying, is that the best for everybody? So, yeah, all of these things can undermine and lead women to make decisions that they may or may not regret later. And I think, if you can just be savvy, educated, informed on as much as possible, so that you can make the best decision for yourself and the best decision you can live with. I think it's important to be able to make a decision that you don't regret later. And sometimes, those decisions that you might regret later, you go, oh yeah, when they offered me that Pitocin, I just kind of didn't realise, I just said yes, and I wish I hadn't, and I wish I'd known, I didn't realise that meant that. And so it's doing your research on those things, understand the consequences of having an induction, understanding the consequences of some of the decisions, so you know whether or not to go with it. These are all the aspects that can really, I think, if you make a decision early on and then you kind of regret it, that can really undermine your confidence going later down the road. You kind of think, oh my goodness, I don't know what I'm doing, I keep making a decision. And that really plays into your own sense of how you feel about what's going on. So I think this undermining of confidence can come from all sorts of places, which makes it, when you add a hormone to the mix as well, can make it a very challenging experience for some during pregnancy if they're not getting that support. If you're getting that support from all sides, you can just sail through that. But if you're not, you keep hitting these walls, and that can make it really hard, So finding the support.
There are supportive groups out there, aren't there? When you start to, once you know that there are supportive groups, you can then look for, if your friends and family are not supportive, you can find a group that is, to bolster you up with what's right for you, like the positive birth movement groups, or there might be other local to you antenatal groups or birth groups. Start asking around on forums or groups till you find your group that's local to you or online to you.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it does. And I think, and there are, the great thing now with Facebook particularly, there's loads of groups out there now you can hook up. But sometimes nothing really does kind of replace that in-person support. So I think finding local groups is really important. And you're right, it doesn't have to be like where I used to live, there was a home birth group, and you couldn't just, you weren't banned if you didn't want a home birth, you could still go along for that support. And so it's just plugging into because often those groups, you get a lot of doulas and birth professionals turning up, and they're just brilliant in terms of supporting you, and they can just bring the right level of energy and insight.
They're really knowledgeable, they've got the knowledge, they can distill it down to what you need rather than having to trawl through 10 books. You're not sure if they're the right book yet.
Exactly.
They can listen to you, and they've got that experience, they trust birth, and it's kind of people you need to be around. They're going to believe in you.
In fact, like now there are so many podcasts now, like when I launched my podcast, there really weren't, there's probably a handful of us doing a birth podcast, maybe 4 of us. Now there's like zillions of them. So depending on your own philosophy, on what kind of information you're after, there's so much information out there to help you, to give you that knowledge, to help you make those decisions. That I think now it's much easier for women to feel a lot more confident around birth, given what information is available for free out there and what support is available. But it's just not everybody is able to access that. So what works for one person might not work for another. So it's about having options, I think, and being self-aware, noticing if this stuff makes you feel down, this stuff saps your confidence, and this stuff doesn't. So do more of the stuff that makes you feel better, and do less of the stuff. Close down, get out of some of those groups that are negative. stop, like snooze some of those people on Facebook that are really negative about stuff until you've had the baby, you know, like really kind of block some of that stuff out of your world if you know it's having an effect on you, and only surround yourself with some of that positive stuff, because you need to protect your confidence, you need to protect how you feel, because that has such a great impact, such an important impact on the birth experience itself. So you need to start really protecting yourself and putting some boundaries in place. So that's one way of doing it on social media, is eliminating some of those negative feeds and negative comments that come into your world.
Yeah, definitely. So it's been a really great chat today. And do you have any final thoughts to finish with, of like the one thing you'd really love women to know to help them get confident birth?
I think is that she is the one that she's got everything within her to make this an incredible experience. Even if she can't access it straight away, she can find the help and support to access that within her, to have this incredible experience that can really help her to have this birth that really does fill her with joy for the rest of her life. And I think, that she's got everything that she needs already. It's about reconnecting to that, and maybe even if you need somebody else's help to get to that, accept it, take it, whatever it takes. But once you've tapped into that, you've got it all. You can do it. You can absolutely do this, and trust that you can. I know a lot of birth professionals say, "Oh, just trust your body," and the self-trust is not an easy thing to kind of learn, but you can. And I think birth is one thing that can help you to trust yourself and trust your body. So yeah, just know that it's all within you, and that you can have an experience that can define you. I think I've said everything else as part of the chat, to be honest with you, Charlotte.
No, it's really beautiful. It's really great. It's a great one to end on, bringing it back to what you know, what you have, and just remembering you've got the answers. You're looking for them maybe, but you've got them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So thanks so much for your time today. It's really inspiring to talk to you, and I hope everyone gets a lot of benefit out of listening to you.
It's been lovely, Charlotte. Lovely. Thank you for having me on.
Good. Thank you.